It's a great day. My name is Shay Brown, the Happy Entrepreneur, and welcome to the Happy Entrepreneur Show, the #1 business development and revenue focused late night show in the country where we're on a mission. And our mission really is to inspire. And yes, our mission is to empower you, the entrepreneur, the hardworking entrepreneur, with all of the resources that are necessary to execute that big vision you have for the people you were called to serve. And on this episode, we have the one and only Tony Chatman, who's in the building, who will talk about the force multiplier and really how not only to be a leader, but how to lead teams. What's up, Tony? How are you, my friend?
Hey, Shay, I'm great, man. It's good to see you.
Good, man. Thanks a lot for being here. And can we just address the elephant in the room as we start off, which is we're going to be talking about the force multiplier. We'll be talking about leadership. I like to get your definition on leadership because it means different things to different people. And number two, why do folks still struggle with leadership skills these days when there's Instagram? They can get instant, any motivation they need from there. They can go online. They even got ChatGPT, should be able to write their emails for them and all this other stuff. Yet they're still struggling with leading their teams. What's some of the biggest challenges you're seeing facing leaders today?
Well, I think starting off from the top, people underestimate how complex leadership really is, right? One of my friends used to say, this ain't grits where you just add water and stir. Like there's a science and an art to it. And so the reality is you have to start to figure out how people tick and what moves them. And unfortunately, many of the resources that are out there, they're more of a one size fits all. If you do this, then everyone's going to respond. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. And so really, when I look at leadership, it is the art and science of leading people. And we have to remember that we're leading actual people.
So the question I have for you, I guess directly is, you have to be a leader of one before you're a leader of many. And I want you to talk to the group of folks who have to be a leader of one. That's themselves, so they can improve their mindset. This is about mindset of a leader. This is about mindset of a leader, everyone that's listening. And number two, the mindset of a leader that has to lead teams. And I think that maybe they're the same. I don't know. That's why I'm asking you the question, my man.
It's a great question. The truth is they're related. So let's start off with the mindset of the individual. What is your goal and your purpose? Because you have to keep that big picture always in focus. That's what's going to drive you. That's what's going to propel you. But that's also what's going to keep you on track. Is your primary function to make a lot of money? Is your primary function to build an empire? Is your primary function to change this within the workplace? Is your primary function to build a legacy? That's going to keep you on track. And keeping that in focus is a major thing. The second thing is incremental growth toward that purpose or that goal. We always hear the phrase baby steps. It can be baby steps. It can be huge leaps. Unfortunately, it never works out where it's just, a straight linear move up. It's always ups and downs and ups and downs. But it's, what am I doing right now to improve my skill set? So that I can, and here's the thing, not so that I can do the thing that I'm aiming at doing, it's so that I can be the person who can accomplish that. There's a big difference between doing and being. And the mindset of a great leader has to do far more with being than with doing. Now, you translate that now into leadership. I mentioned earlier that leadership is a little more complex than we give it credit for. But there is also a simplicity to it. Better people are better leaders. And I want you to hear me on this one because some of you are processing this. Often we think to be a great leader, I have to be this person who's very different than who I am. And the question you have to ask yourself is, why would someone want to willingly follow me? If you can become that person, and for most of us, there are things within our personality, within our character, within who we are, that people will naturally want to follow if we reveal that to them in a way that is inspiring to them and also beneficial to them. And so, we really have to make sure that ourselves, we're focused on the right purpose, mindset, vision, and that we're moving towards that. But then B, the better person we become, the better leader we become.
I like that. The better person we become, the better leader we become. there are folks right now that are reading your bio, right? They've already Googled you. They're looking up. And then there's
Right.
other folks that are like, Shay, who in the LL Cool J is this guy talking, right? Sounds good, makes sense, and sense probably for a lot of folks. So we'll slow down for a moment. And if you can, tell me a little about who is Tony. Really, what's the backstory to Tony? That's number one. And then what was that pivotal moment that you said to yourself, you know what? This whole leadership thing, this whole building teams and growing teams, it's my jam. So two-part question. Who are you?
Sure.
And then what was the pivotal moment that led to where you are now?
Sounds great. I have a very unique background as a speaker and as a leader in this area because my background is in chemical engineering. That's what I went to school for. I got my first patent. But very early in my career, I realized something. I'm a very good engineer, but what would make me stand out and what would make me more effective is not becoming a better engineer, it's becoming a better communicator and better relationship builder. I started to realize that the more I could get people to like me and trust me, the more I could get done. And by doing that, I became a pretty critical asset to my organization. And so once that happened and once that light bulb clicked, I started pursuing the idea of understanding relationships and how people click the same way I pursued engineering. I went after the science and the art of it, and I made it pretty much my life's ambition to be great in that area. So that's kind of the background of who I am. Now, there's been a lot of iterations of Tony Chatman, okay? There's Tony Chatman, the chemical engineer. Then there's Tony Chatman, who left the chemical engineering world and took a 70% pay cut to work in the ministry for a decade. That's a different Tony Chatman, and there's a whole transition that went into that. Then there's the Tony Chatman that, as we're talking about how do we get to this space, when did it all click? After the ministry, after serving people, I burned out. I was kind of the fix-it guy. I wasn't just the guy who built large ministries. I would often go and fix ministries that were on fire. And after a while, I just burned out, and had to go back and figure out life. And my wife and I were trying to work it out. And I was in a weird situation where many of the jobs that would make sense, I was overqualified for. And many of the jobs that I was probably qualified for, I didn't see how I would fit in, or I just didn't have the confidence to go after them. And so I found myself working as a mechanical engineer, really more of a temp position, but doing mechanical engineering. And I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I pulled together a group of my closest friends, really my advisory board. And this is a mind-blowing story, so brace yourself. I'm going to give you the short version of this one. I said, I need to think through this. I can't figure it out. There's a Les Brown phrase in which he says, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. So I needed some people who were not in the frame to help me figure this out. And so we were at a close friend of mine's house, and we were sitting there, and after all the niceties, he just kicked it off with asking one of the most cliche questions you can ask. And he asked, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be? Now, in my mind, I had already put together that what had made me successful in all these other iterations of life was my ability to connect the dots very quickly and my ability to communicate it very clearly. So in my mind, I was really thinking about doing some business development, and to be honest, doing some business development for him because I knew I could help him get his stuff together. But almost reflexively, I said, well, gosh, if I could do anything, I'd get paid to speak. And before I could get but out of my mouth, the wheels started turning, and 3 weeks later, I was in Bermuda opening for Les Brown. And so that was the pivotal moment.
Now, of course, you can't just leave us hanging, man. You can't say you were just opening for Les Brown, and people are like, okay, but how in the LL Cool J did that happen? I mean, we're all sitting around a little curious. You can't just leave us on the edge, man.
Yeah, well, I can. That's part of being a good speaker is doing that type of thing. So the bigger part of the story is these are all friends who'd known me for over a decade. They'd heard me speak. They'd heard me speak in, kind of the context of being a minister. They'd heard me speak in other contexts. They knew who I was. They trusted me. And so this friend who I was speaking, whose house we were at, his name is Elroy Smith. He actually is, at the time, he was the program director for 3 radio stations in Chicago. For example, if you ever go back and watch the New Edition documentary or biop on BET. When they play Candy Girl, when they announce it, they go, "This is Elroy Smith playing Candy Girl," because he was the first person to ever play New Edition on the radio. He's got all these stories, right? So I say this of, if I could do anything in the world, I'd be a speaker. Elroy looks at me and he says, "Well, Les Brown works for me on Sundays." Full transparency, I didn't know who Les Brown was at the time, okay? But I was like, "Oh, wow." Calls Les, kind of doesn't work out. We just couldn't get a hold of him. And then he says, "Man, if I had known this before, I've got a radio station in Bermuda. We're doing a special event with Les and some of his speakers. I could have gotten you there." Right then, one of my other best friends, because we're all really tight, challenged him, goes, "Really, Elroy? You would have put him on stage? For real?" Elroy took the challenge and said, "You know what? If you can get there, I can't pay you, but if you can get there, I'll put you on stage." My friend Roger, the one who challenged him, said, "Let me see that computer for a second." Typed up some stuff, asked me a couple questions, and he looked at me and said, "I just bought you a ticket. You have no excuses." So now I had to get it all together. I go out to Bermuda. 3 weeks later, I open for Les Brown. Butterfield Bank, the sponsor of the event, comes up and says afterwards, "This was fantastic. We want to expand this into a full weekend, but we don't want all these people. We just want Les and Tony." And so then I came back a few months later. We had the special weekend. At that event was a representative from the Minister of Education. She immediately hired me to go speak at some schools while I was still on that trip. And from there, the ball was rolling. So that's more of the background story to what just happened.
Oh, man, I love it. And so now you're in the speaking business. Now you're also in the training business and helping folks not only develop leaders, but also develop teams as a result of being a leader so they can do more and have more and give more and all that cool stuff. But you also, as folks are looking right now, they say, "Shay, what about this force multiplier," right? Because I know one of the topics of discussion they showed up was the force multiplier, right? Like how to get more out of your team. I don't have it right here in front of me, but that's the subtitle. But can you take a moment for those folks that have never read the book and they want to know, Shay, the force multiplier, what is it? Why is it important to me as a leader or as someone that's running a company or individual? Take a moment and kind of enlighten us, please.
Sure. So let me give you a quick story. A number of years ago, I was with one of my closest friends, and I mean, we're tight like this. In fact, I was just emailing back and forth with his wife right before this conversation. Well, you can imagine how hurt I was when I found out he was once again being deployed to Afghanistan. So we decided we're going to host a party, not really a going away party, but we got your back party. And there were about 30 to 40 people at my house. We're having a great time. We're eating, we're drinking, we're laughing. And then at one point, we go around the room and we just start sharing. We're sharing how we're going to stay in touch with him, how we're going to make sure that his wife and his 2 young children are taken care of, all of these other things. But while this is going on, there is one person I'm waiting to hear from. He's a high-ranking officer in the Army. And so I knew he was going to say something interesting because he had been at a lot of what he called these deployment parties before, but I was in no way prepared for what he would say. When it was his turn, he said, "You are what I call a force multiplier because by your very presence, you bring out the best in everyone around you." And when he said it, it clicked because even at that time, I spoke about leadership. I taught, I trained on leadership. I was considered an expert by many on leadership, but rarely had I heard people say, because a leader is present, everyone else is better. I had heard leaders have followers, leaders make other leaders, leaders turn the ship, but not you make everyone better. And then I thought to myself, but shouldn't that really be the definition of leadership? That by your presence, you make everyone better. And that is what in a career makes you indispensable. And as an entrepreneur, allows you to scale. And so I looked at that idea of a force multiplier and I said, I am going to teach people how to do that, how to make everyone better and not just manage people and have them do work. So that was the idea behind the force multiplier.
I love it. And Yeah, here's a two-part question because everything sounds so fine right now. This is great. Your life is just moving along. I love it, by the way. The question I have for you is that of all the mentors you had, it's one of my favorite questions I ask, by the way. Of all the mentors you had on this journey of life, what's one lesson you learned from any of the mentors that you could share with the audience and me and the audience that we could benefit from? Or better said for you is what's one of the best pieces of advice you ever been given, right? And for those folks that are listening, that are out there right now, you get to lean in a little bit because you get to take away something that Tony holds for him that's not only helped him be a better leader, but a better individual, a better human being, a better person that you can take. And you may never meet his mentor. You may never know where the source came from, but you can benefit for the rest of your life. So that's the question. What's one of the
Great
best
question.
pieces of advice that you've been given?
Yeah, I would say this is more, it was personal and business because I realized all through my life, the one thing I struggled with was self-confidence. And so one of my mentors, his name is Bob Perrin. He used to be Chief Information Officer for Ryder Truck. He was VP of IT for United Airlines, I think. He invited me to this meeting. And it was a meeting, kind of a blue ocean strategy meeting, if people are familiar with that book. And so there was a point in which we kind of went around the room and started introducing ourselves. And everyone in there was a heavy hitter. Chief Information Officer for United Airlines, VP of IT for Walmart. I mean, you're just going around. And it gets to me, and I'm like, entrepreneur? I mean, like, I don't even know what to say, right? I'm like, well, I'm a close friend of Bob's. I'm an entrepreneur, blah, blah, blah. And he cleaned up. He goes, listen, Tony's one of my most even though he was my mentor, spiritually, I was his mentor. So we had this really cool relationship. He goes, listen, Tony's one of my most trusted advisors, trusted friends. He's one of the smartest people I know. His perspective is, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. During the first break, he pulls me aside and he says, listen, these are your peers. Act like it. And it just, something clicked. Like, I didn't envision these people as being my peers, but they viewed me that way and I didn't see that. And that's carried me through a lot of stuff because since then, I have built really close relationships with generals, admirals, CEOs, et cetera, et cetera. And those words ring in my ear almost every time I meet them it's you're their peer. Don't let all of this insecurity or imposter syndrome play into this. Realize how they view you and embrace it. And so that's the best piece of advice for me. And I think a lot of people who are in the entrepreneurial space, you need to hear that. And even if you're not, even if you're I'm a manager, I'm a director, you need to hear that because it's so easy to think, I got lucky, I don't want to be found out. The reality is you deserve to be there. But if you don't act that way, you won't believe it. Other people will see it, but you won't believe it. And thus you won't do what you need to do to keep moving up to the next level.
Well said, Ben. Thanks for sharing. You know, we have a segment here called Today is My January 1st, right? It's one of our core segments. And for those folks that are listening that tune in every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you wait for this one moment. You can go ahead and say those words. Today, that's right, today is my January 1st. And for all the new folks that are welcome, that are here for the very first time, welcome aboard, welcome aboard. I'll share with you that today is my January 1st is one of our core values here at the Happy Entrepreneur Show. What it stands for is that it's a fresh start. Today is my January 1st is a do-over. What it means is that your past, no matter what the past is, it no longer equals the future. So my question to Tony is that when you hear those words, today is my January 1st, one, what do you hear? And secondly, where was a time in your life where there was a challenge, there was a setback, things didn't go the way you wanted them to, and you had to bounce back?
What do I hear when I hear the day is my January 1st? And I'm going to take this in a bit of a spiritual direction, okay, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The story of Joseph in the Bible is probably one of the most fascinating stories to me. Many of you are familiar with it. He is, abandoned by his brothers, really thrown into a cistern, sold into slavery, goes into jail, but he ends up as Pharaoh's number 2 person. And in many ways, he was as powerful as Pharaoh. But there's this really obscure passage in there in which now Joseph, he's married, he has 2 children, and his second child, he names him Manasseh. And he says, he names him Manasseh because God has caused me to forget all of the trouble that I had in my father's household. And when you think of his life, he had major trouble, right? I mean, his brother sold him into slavery. He goes into jail. He's accused of rape. I mean, all of these things. And he said, but I have been blessed so much right now that the pain of the past no longer hurts me. That's what goes into my brain. A time in which that is real in my life. So, I started my business in 2006, the end of 2006. That sounds like great timing until you remember the recession of 2008. When the recession of '08 hit, which was really in late '07, my business was wiped completely out, right? I had all this momentum. I'm building a name for myself. And now I'm literally starting from scratch. And what I will say is I did not think to myself, and let me paint this picture. When I say starting from scratch, I have no money in the bank anymore. My wife, because of her health, can't work. I can't pay the mortgage. I mean, it's bleak. But in my mind, what did not happen was, what do I do next? In my mind was, how do I make this work? Because see, I believed that I had a gift and that I had put in the work to turn that gift into a skill. So I knew I'm going to figure out how to make the speaking thing work. And so what I did is, my best friend and I in the speaking industry, we put our heads together and we reinvented ourselves. And we did it in such a way that we said, during a recession, the government is an incredible marketplace. And so we're going to make sure that we always hedge our portfolio of business to always have some government work that we're doing, because that's going to get us through. And in all honesty, more people know me now for doing government work than know me for doing the force multiplier or opening for Les Brown or all these other things. It's almost redefined me. But I took that dark moment and I refocused and I came out with this. And in all honesty, by doing that, that's what helped me through the pandemic. Because when other people's businesses were struggling, that strategic decision I made, because I made a strategic decision instead of an emotional one, that strategic decision really prepared me for what would happen in the pandemic. And my business actually flourished during that time.
Wow. Congratulations, man, for flourishing. And thanks so much for being so vulnerable, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. Now, take a moment, if you could, and to tell us a little about the Force Multiplier, who should read it, and what one or two of the takeaways are. I'm going to encourage you all to get that book, but take a moment so they kind of get an overview of what it is.
Sure. So the book is not, there's a secret part of this book. It's not just for leaders. It's phenomenal for leaders, okay? But what it will help you do is figure people out. When I've talked about the Force Multiplier on stage, I've had people come up and tell me, oh, you've really helped me figure out, management. But I've had more people come up to me and say, now I get my spouse. Now I get my children. Now I get, this person who's always been difficult for me. Now I get how they think. And I realized they weren't difficult. They're just different. And I had to figure that out. And so that's kind of the secret sauce of the Force Multiplier, is that although it is absolutely about leadership, it's about how to win people over in life and how to really build collaborations and connections that will last you a lifetime. So that's really the secret of the Force Multiplier. So in a strange way, I think it's for everybody. It's been used for a doctorate and PhD program at Morgan State. I mean, there's a lot of people that are.
Shout out to Morgan State, by the way. You got to say it a little slower. I'm a Morgan State alumni. You got to,
Oh, well, let me slow down and say that.
Done by Morgan State University. Go Bears.
Well, there you go. For those of you who are trying to get a master's or a PhD, especially in education, you're leading universities or community colleges at Morgan State University, you will be required to read the Force Multiplier. And I'm so grateful to be in partnership with such a phenomenal university. Did I say that well enough?
Well done.
Yeah. Listen, it will help you out in life. And the thing is practical. I didn't want to write a book that was all theoretical and you're trying to figure out what to do. You start reading this book and I know specifically what to do. And there's a personality test in there. So I know specifically what to do with different personalities, but also from a leadership standpoint, it teaches you how to delegate effectively. It teaches you how to combine, giving praise and also giving corrective criticism at the same time. It's very specific. So it assumes you don't know anything, but it also applies even if you're on your way to the C-suite, there's stuff for you to learn.
I love it, man, because when the question is asked, when do you stop learning? The obvious answer is you never stop learning. So this is a book
Absolutely.
that we always can get better. And that's what superstars believe. They believe they can always get a little bit better, man. Take a moment if you would. And I love it. Thanks so much. You guys talking to a human relations expert, by the way. This guy gets humans. He gets it. He gets it. He gets it. As you come down the home stretch, I guess one of the final questions is, what type of clients, because you do so much, are you looking for? Or I'm not sure if your firm's taking on any clients, but let's assume they are. What type of clients is your firm looking for these days? And number two, how can people best connect with Tony Chatman and stay in this conversation over and beyond the time that we have now?
Sure. So number one, I'm looking for organizations that are trying to reframe and rebuild their culture. Even though we've talked a lot about leadership today, a lot of our work right now is in building a healthy workplace culture, especially around the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation, right? And so a lot of our clients right now, we're doing work with some national labs. I'm really excited about working with hospitals and healthcare because I know that the work that we do changes mortality rates, okay? But I also am just very strong in creating a healthy workplace for everyone because the majority of us, we spend more time at work than we do any place else. And so if we're not happy at work, it's going to be hard to be happy in general. So that would be my starting place. Easiest way to find me is know how to spell my name, Tony Chatman, C-H-A-T as in Tom, M-A-N. You go to TonyChatman.com is my website. It points you to everything, my social media, Facebook and LinkedIn, Tony Chatman. Unfortunately, those were both taken for Instagram and TikTok. So for both of those is Tony Chatman Speaks. But you Google me, I come up on the first page. It's kind of hard to miss me as long as you spell my name right.
Thanks a lot, man. Let me say thanks so much for being on the Happy Entrepreneur Show. I know you can always make more money, but you can't make more time. So thanks again for your most precious resource.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you. Thank you to viewers. Thank you to the ones that tune in. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Without you, well, there is no show, by the way. So thanks for giving us your time. And I never get tired. Every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I never get tired of sharing these words that you're awesome, that you really are incredible, that no matter what's happening, what's going on, that you've got so much greatness inside you, and that for you, today, in fact, is your January 1st. And because of just that one reason, your best is still yet to come. Your best is yet to come. Your best is yet to come. With that being said, my name is Shay Brown, the Happy Entrepreneur. Make it a great day, everyone. And I promise you from the bottom of my heart, we'll make some good things happen. We connect again next time. God bless. And we wish you success. Thanks a lot, Tony. We out, man. Peace.
Thanks, Jay.